What struck me most about Moscow Art Theater was their emphasis on the process, whether it was an acting class, a voice class, or a movement class. And I'll say it again, the training there is the most athletic I have done, and that was only 2 weeks. So, I mean, just imagining like a 4-year program at Moscow Art Theater, that's pretty amazing. Movement class, we imitated animals and we did jumping exercises and bending exercises, and we were doing things. I did things with my body that I didn't think I could do. And what I remember most about movement class was I was able to take my 2 feet, bend backwards, and actually touch the ground behind me for the first time in like 20 years. I think I did that when I was 5 at the old apartment growing up. So this was like the first time in 20 years I was able to, touch behind my head like that, and that felt pretty incredible. And we did another day where we did a shoulder stand. So you position your arms in such a way that you form a solid base, and then you slowly put your feet up onto this arm and then extend them upwards. And the teacher helped me out with that exercise. I was the guinea pig on the first day we did it. And again, the fact that I was able to even do it was amazing. And I distinctly remember it being all about the process. And I'm just using movement class as an example, but the same is said for voice, where we do breathing exercises and we have special emphasis on the exhale. In fact, you never inhale, you just exhale, and your body naturally inhales. And then with acting classes, where we focused exclusively on etudes and imitating animals, and then we imitated animals trapped in human bodies for a day. And just a carefully observed observation of the text using Chekhov's seagull. I think through acting class, I learned to appreciate the process more than anything else. There's been acting classes, or there's been shows I've done where you go to the show, you meet the call time, and within 5 minutes you're on stage and you call it a night. And then it's always like, okay, everybody, get off book by this date. We open on this date, and strike the show and we're done. That's it. Go home, everybody. Good job. Great. Have some red wine. And that's great, and you build experience as you go, but the intensity and the emphasis on the training at Moscow Art is what I'm taking away, what I'm remembering the most of. Yeah, and just that appreciation and the passion for the actor's process in, observing something, seeing it, making a decision, and then acting, and really living in that moment. And if you can take that to other parts of your life, I think you'd have a better time appreciating, everything around you, and you wouldn't take it for granted. We saw a variety of shows when we were over there in Moscow, and we had very full days, and I think we saw like 5 shows that were paid for by the program, and they came at the end of the day. And what really struck me about all the shows, it was interesting. There's a gun in every single show. Someone gets shot, a gun goes off, or some sort of conflict and issue in the play is resolved with a gun. So that was a very interesting way to advance the story. It was an interesting way to mix up the dynamics between the actors, and it was a very great way to keep the audience awake, because you hear that gunshot and you just jump in your seat. I loved all the shows we saw. Certainly there was some travel fatigue on my part, and of course the language barrier. So I didn't understand every single part of the shows. But what stays with me and what struck me, despite the language barrier, was the relationships between the characters, the concentration and the attention of the actors, and their control of physicality, voice, and movement, the blocking, direction, and spatial relationships going on the stage, the scenic elements, the sounds, the visuals, the music, the intermissions, that magic feeling everybody felt when the curtain opened or closed to indicate that the show was starting. And I don't say it lightly. I mean, it was some of the most impressive theater I've seen relative to what I've seen in Tucson or anywhere else, in the last like 2 decades, 20 something, 27 years. And just seeing theater in another language in the country where Moscow Art Theater originated, in lieu of studying Stanislavski and everything he's taught and seeing it come to life there on that stage, that was just so inspiring. And I just left with such a wonderful feeling about the capacities of what could be done in live performance, and it was just beautiful to watch. Well, if you've never studied abroad before, I recommend you go with an open mind. Um, I have never been out of the country in my life. The farthest place I've been is Boston, Massachusetts, or Seattle, Washington, depending on which direction on the map you look. So having never been out of the country and just taking this trip on a whim and doing not a lot of research about Moscow, but having research about theater and Stanislavski, for me it was an interesting mix. It was an interesting ratio where I knew quite a bit about the theater and I was very excited to see that in that context, and I knew nothing about the city, let alone being in a big city because I'm used to smaller cities, towns, countrysides. So I would recommend going with an open mind. Be humble, be willing to learn, be ready to make some mistakes in terms of language barriers, culture shock, xenophobia, and money transactions. There was always some interesting mistakes with like the rubles. Am I giving enough? Am I not giving enough? And what am I going to do with all these coins? The coins are actually great for filling up your Metro card or buying cheap ice cream, which is freaking delicious. So yeah, there's always a plus and a benefit with the extra change. Um, and again, adding to that element of having a neutral and open mind, I also would say don't be afraid of new experiences. One thing I wish immediately I can do is go back and venture out a little more with the group and see things. I'm very introverted and introspective and reflective, which are not bad qualities, but sometimes gets a little I get so closed off trying to analyze and rationalize and process everything. And when you're in a new culture where you don't understand the alphabet, you don't understand everything going on around you, sometimes there's no time to stop and you just have to go with it. And I think that's my advice, is just accept that part of yourself that is fighting and resisting and doesn't want to have a good time, and say, okay, that's fine. I acknowledge you. You're there. And then move on and allow yourself to have a fun time. That's what I would change. And that's in hindsight. And that's what I recommend to anybody studying abroad for the first time is um, absorb it all in. It's a new experience, and you never know when you're going to get that wonderful experience again because it's a new thing. You'll say, okay, well, I'll know better next time. Fine, but next time you'll have the experience. So it's one, once it's new, it can never be new again. Once it is new, it can never be new again. So do everything you can to accept and allow and just surrender to what's going on around you, and you'll have a great time.